And hello, and welcome back. And we are doing this thing. We're still doing it. Like every time I hit record, I'm right there with you. Like, oh shit, we're still doing it. Yeah. Um. So right. Welcome. This is Harry Potter Abridged. Um. We are now into book number 3, which is year number 3, which is The Prisoner of Azkaban. And we are now in chapter 2 of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and that chapter is entitled Aunt Marge's Big Mistake. And so, yeah. Um, the first two books do, while I do think that they have, distinctive enough actual stories from each other, they do follow similar plots in a lot of ways, and the books end with similar situations where, what we've discussed. Anyway, um, this book marks a bit of a transition, and it's also a transition in the length too. It's well, I don't, I should I we're gonna do this. We're gonna pretend like we're live-ish, and you're just hanging out with me here, because I should have done this before. I know I should have. That's right. Um. mm, 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 mm. So yeah, this kind of marks a middle ground. So I just found like the words. They're not. It's not pages. It's words. But that's actually a better counter, because pages can be misleading depending on the formatting, or yeah, well, just depending on the formatting. Um, and so Philosopher's Stone is like right around like almost 77,000 words. Chamber of Secrets is 85,000 words ish. So it's pretty close together, relatively speaking. But then Prisoner of Azkaban jumps up to 107,000 words. So it's like it's a bigger leap than between the first two. The first two visually look very similar in thickness, whereas the third one goes up a bit, and then the fourth one jumps on up to 190. So it's like practically doubles from there. But still, it this this so that's the thing. Prisoner of Azkaban's not it's like quite in between sizes between 2 and 4, but it just is more of a significant jump in the length of the story. Anyway, so point being is that the formula changes up a bit. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like the more simplistic, overarching, like Harry's still Harry. He's still dealing with the same shit that he deals with every year, and of course, well, but that's the other thing. Let me think about this for a minute. I can't remember. Oh man, this is what happens when you're like doing this series, and then also like well, I said this before. I've been saying it. I'm listening to Order of the Phoenix right now. I'm like past the point that well, Dumbledore just left. Anyway, I'm not gonna get into details there, but anyway, I'm trying to remember what the hell happens with Voldemort in this book. This book is obviously largely centered around the mentioned prisoner of Azkaban that's in the title of the book. And actually, like, the bulk of this story doesn't revolve around Voldemort for a change. So it is kind of a break. I feel like there's something I'm not thinking of that will come to me, or that will present itself as we get into the book a little bit further. I mean, I listened to it not that long ago, truth be told. It's just that now that I've moved on with the story, like, even though I did go back and re-listen to this chapter in preparation for this episode, yeah, I'm sure there's probably some tie-in, but I think that this year really has more to do. Well, what it ultimately ends up doing is it helps establish Harry, his the history of his family a little bit, and another special person in his life that he didn't know about. So, and it sets up like the circumstances that led to the murder of his parents, and him getting the scar, and all of that, and the downfall of Voldemort. So Voldemort's involved in that way, and also near the end of the story, there's obviously stuff to do with Voldemort there too. Um, anyway, right. Well, that's all coming. But anyway, we as pretty much, I think all of the books start with Harry at the Dursleys. That much I'm fairly certain is the case. Anyway, so yeah, so we're there, and I'm just trying to like think about everything right now at the same time. It's too much. Um, Right, and so it's actually Harry's birthday now because, the night before in the opening chapter, it was his birthday, chimed in at midnight, but now it's like the proper day of his birthday. But that means nothing at the Dursleys because they give like zero shits about that. Um, so he goes down to breakfast the next day and blah blah blah, and they're ignoring Harry because that's what they do. They have a brand new television because, we got to remind everybody that Dudley is not only fat but also lazy. So they have a television in the kitchen now, so he doesn't have to, because he was complaining loudly about the long walk between the fridge and the television and the living room, which, I mean, yeah. And the thing is it's like it's supposed to speak to like the way he's been raised, which I mean, that's they everything about what we see about how Vernon and Petunia treat Dudley is it's like it's overindulgence to the extreme. But anyway, and so Harry comes in and sits down, and of course, none of them, like I said, they're all ignoring him. And we get our first mention of the prisoner, because there is a notice on the Muggle news they're watching on television, and it says that the public is warned that Black is armed and extremely dangerous. Blah blah blah. Hotline number, etc. etc. Vernon's like commenting on the look of him and how he must be a no good because he looks disheveled and the state of his hair, the filthy layabout, all that good, stuff. And of course, as he mentions the hair, he looks over at Harry because Harry always has untidy hair. It's like magically untidy, which is kind of funny because like in the movies they like. I mean, for reasons that are understandable. First of all, like a lot of them were different directors. I mean, the first couple they look fairly similar because A, it is the same director, and B, they're little kids, so there's a little bit less going on in the styling department there. It seemed like they were kind of still establishing like these are these characters and this is how they look. Hermione's hair is going to look like this for 2 movies. I think it did in the first 2. I mean, truth be told, it's been I didn't really pay that much attention, but. But I know that like later, like each year, like they had like different haircuts. I mean, and it's not uncommon for people to have different haircuts each year at school, in the real world. But it's funny because Rowling goes out of her way to mention that his hair like kind of does the same thing all the time, and that's obviously not something that they even attempted to do in the movies. Maybe early on, but beyond, like starting with movie 3 and moving forward, that's not the case. And boy, the hair in movie 4. Oh, anyway, right. So, boop 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 boop, hair tangent. But Harry, of course, looking at this unknown convict on television, feels like he looks pretty good compared to this guy, because this guy looks pretty rough. And then the newsreader moves on, and Uncle Vernon's like, "Wait a minute," because he's not completely stupid. And he's like, "How? You didn't tell us where he's escaped from." So he has no idea. He's like, "He could be coming up the street right now," which is, of course, foreshadowing of what's going to happen in the next chapter, even though we won't realize it until way later in the book, but whatever. And Aunt Petunia. I forget, like, it's the second chapter of the book, but this is the first time we see the Dursleys, so I forget that we're getting, like, a physical description of each one of them each time, but we know what they look like, so we're not going to dwell on that. But we do get to mention that as Uncle Vernon makes that comment about, like, he could be coming up the street right now, and Petunia's all like looking out the window, like Harry's like knowing that she would want to be the one to call the hotline number from the television if she did see him. Yes, and we get a little taste of how Vernon Dursley feels about criminals. He says, and it's funny too because in the first chapter, Harry said it's in the narration, it mentioned that the Dursleys have a very medieval view on magic. Well, it's not only magic that apparently they have medieval views about, because of course hanging persisted beyond that. But Vernon's like, when are they going to learn that hanging is the only way to deal with these people? And I'm like, wow, hanging, huh? Just, of course, and that's also without having any idea like what the person who was on television was even convicted of. So like, how do you know if hanging would have been even a potentially suitable offense if hanging was still a thing that was done in like whatever this is, like 1993 or some shit. Anyway, and so Vernon's like, oh, I gotta get ready to go. Marge's train gets in at 10, and Harry's like, whoa, hold the phone. Not Aunt Marge. I'm sorry, Aunt Marge. And so we're like, huh, who's Aunt Marge? And then we find out that she is Uncle Vernon's sister. And even though she's not a blood relative of Harry's, they have forced him to call her aunt all his life. Blah, blah, blah. Aunt Marge is a country dweller. She breeds bulldogs. So, if she wasn't of the family Dursley, she might not have been a horrible person. I mean, she lives in the country and she breeds bulldogs. That doesn't sound so, on the surface, doesn't sound so bad, but we can imagine that A, because Harry seems to be dreading it, and B, because she's related to Vernon Dursley, that it's probably not going to be a lovely thing. And we get a little bit of memories of Marge, so we can get like a feel for why Harry's dreading this. At Dudley's 5th birthday party, Aunt Marge had whacked Harry around the shins with her walking stick to stop him beating Dudley at musical statues. I can imagine how that must work. Anyway, And then one year she came for Christmas and gave Dudley a computerized robot and gave Harry a bag of dog biscuits. So she goes out of her way to insult and abuse him. Um, and she apparently came to visit the year before Harry went to Hogwarts. And he accidentally stepped on the paw of one of her dogs, and this dog, Ripper, who was coming on this visit too, chased Harry out into the garden and up a tree, and they leave him out there until after midnight. So I mean, like, the shit that Harry's gone through in his life is like fucking ridiculous. And Marge definitely has played her role. Though not being around as often, when she is, things are just that much shittier. Um, and of course, if the incident's ever brought up, it still brings tears of laughter to Dudley's eyes. So, so we find out that she's coming to stay for a week, and then we get filled in on some other information that Uncle Vernon has told Marge that Harry's going to this like basically like a school for like fuck ups, or like, you know, well, it's called blah 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 blah. Where is it? Saint Brutus's Secure Center for Incurably Criminal Boys. So it's like a rehab halfway house kind of type place, but that's where you go to school. I mean, you know, obviously Harry's not going there, but the fact that that's what he's told Marge, so Harry's obviously like, what? This is fucking ridiculous. Like, I mean, I didn't expect you to tell her where I was actually going, but you could have just said I was going to Stonewall High, because that's where he was actually going to go until Hogwarts came into the picture. Anyway, and then, but leading you even like before that, Vernon's also like, you keep a civil tongue, blah blah blah, and no funny stuff, your abnormality, she doesn't know, blah, 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 etc., etc. So anyway, so Harry's just like, this is, god damn it, you know? It's like, never mind that it's my birthday today. I don't expect anybody to acknowledge that, but what I get instead is, like, the worst thing that could possibly happen for my birthday. And it is, in fact, the worst birthday present the Dursleys have ever given him. Look at, there it is. So Vernon says he's getting ready to head off. So he leaves the kitchen. And, And then before Vernon actually gets out of the house, Harry has, like, a brainwave about that Hogwarts permission form for the visit into Hogsmeade in this coming year. So he runs out there, and Vernon's like, "I'm not taking you," and he's like, "Like, I'd go with you anyway." Harry does have some of his, like, perfect teen angst moments. Anyway, and he's like, "Yeah, so here's the thing. You want me to, like, be a good boy and tell the right lies to Aunt Marge so that she'll think I go to whatchamacallit." And Vernon's all like, "Rah, rah, 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 you go to this is the school name, rah, rah, rah." And Harry's like, "Well, see, here's the thing. I got this form, and if you sign it, I'll, like, do all the stuff that you asked me to do." Because he's like, you know, you could beat my ass and shit, but, like, if I say stuff to her, she's not gonna forget it. So even if you're mad and I get in trouble, like, it's not gonna, like, change what she hears. And so he's like, "Fine, you do your thing and I'll sign your form. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. So they reach a little truce. But Harry totally like scares him. Like he totally is able to kind of like sort of bully in a way Uncle Vernon into to agreeing to sign the form because he's so scared of what might happen if Marge finds out that Harry is a wizard. So I mean, and you can't really blame him. I mean, he's got very, very, very little leverage at all ever with the Dursleys. So if you get a little bit, you gotta use it. So there's all that. Let's see. So Harry goes upstairs and he's like, well, shit, if I'm gonna have to start pretending I'm a fucking muggle, then let's get to it. So he like, packs all his stuff and hides it, the like cards and just other things, presents and stuff, and puts them under the floorboard with his homework and all of that. And then he sends Hedwig on with Errol over to Ron. He leaves a note for Ron with Hedwig. And Hedwig, of course, looks kind of like, rawr, I gotta leave? What the fuck, man? And he's like, dude, like, don't do this. Don't do this to me. Like, this is not my fault. So he sends them off. And then before you know it, the car is coming back into the drive, and there goes Vernon and Aunt Marge. And for whatever reason, Petunia makes him get the door when I don't know why she wouldn't do it. Like, I don't know. Anyway, so there she comes, and she's like the female version of Vernon. Like, she's fairly large too, and beefy and purple faced, because no. Anyway, and she's carrying, not even like on a leash. She's carrying under her one of her arms an old and evil-tempered bulldog. And so anyway, so she comes in and she's like, "Where's my dudders?" And so yeah, she calls Dudley in, also calls him her Neffy Poo. Ugh. Anyway, and so here comes Dudley waddling down the hall, and he's wearing a bow tie. Oh man. And so we get like this interesting thing of like where Dudley apparently tolerates Aunt Marge's hugs and kisses because she pays him. Because apparently like Dudley comes away from this like hug and kiss with like a crisp 20-pound note. And I don't know, I guess maybe she just likes to spoil Dudley, like as if he weren't spoiled enough already. But it's like interesting that that's the way Harry sees it, that he's like paid to hug her or kiss her or whatever. But anyway, so Aunt Marge is loud and like blah blah blah, and so they come in for tea because they're English and that's what you do, even if you're shitty people. So Harry takes her luggage up to her room or whatever. I guess he's like, basically he's just like, any time that he doesn't have to be around her is good time in this particular instance. So anyway, it's kind of like the stuff with Aunt Marge is like it's a little bit boring, but it's like they have to sort of establish who she is a little bit, and so we find out that there's some other character named Colonel Fubster who's looking after all of her dogs because she's got a bunch, and he's somebody who's retired now and needs something to do anyway, kind of thing. And Harry comes back in the kitchen and the dog growls at him, of course, and because the animals are always used as extension, or the pets are always used as extensions of their owners' personalities in these stories for the most part. Which, I mean, does kind of tally with like real life in a lot of cases, not always, but a lot of times. And so, of course, now Aunt Marge is paying more attention to Harry, or has turned her attention to him. So she's like questioning him, like, "Still here, are you?" And he says yes, and like that's like the only answer that he could have given, but apparently his tone was ungrateful. Like she's just all she wants to do is give him shit, basically. She hates him just because by proxy. And so it's just kind of whatever Harry does, it's the wrong thing kind of deal. Like if he tries to smile, then she sees it as a smirk. She sees that he hasn't, in her mind, improved since she last saw him, which would have been 4 years earlier. And for whatever reason, she asks Vernon where he sends Harry to school, and so that's the St. Brutus's thing has already come up. And it's mentioned or it's referred to as a first-rate institution for hopeless cases. Excellent, very good. And Aunt Marge apparently approves of physical punishment because she's asking if they used the cane at St. Brutus's, and Harry's like, and he sees Vernon like nodding, and he's like, "Yeah, they do it all the time." And Marge is like, "Yeah, you gotta hit people if they deserve it." Yeah, that's it. A good thrashing, indeed. And she's just like, "Have you been beaten often?" And Harry's like, "Well, fine, if we're going to play this game, then yeah, all the time." And now she's like, "Well, I don't like your tone. If you can be so casual about being beat, they're not hitting you hard enough." And just, lots of stuff about that. But Vernon like senses the whole conversation's going in kind of a dangerous place, and so he actually changes the subject for a change, and that scene comes to an end. And so Marge is getting settled in, and Harry's hating life, and it's like basically normally he's able to sort of just like stay out of their way during the summer, and they leave him alone and he leaves them alone. But now that Marge is here, like she wants him kind of under her nose so she can like basically like ridicule him in front of, well, just ridicule him, period. And she likes to compare Harry with Dudley. And then she finally gets into this like bit, and it comes up once, and then it comes up again in very soon, where she's like basically comparing Harry's like not just his parentage, but like his lineage and his situation to like dogs. You see it in breeding. If there's something wrong with the bitch, there'll be something wrong with the pup. And Harry's just like, he's like trying to distract himself. He's like thinking about his broomstick servicing kit that Hermione got him for his birthday, and he's like trying to like recite lines from the manual so that he can like sort of zen out and like not respond. But that last comment obviously hit him pretty hard because just, there's like, not only are you comparing his parents basically to dogs, but you're also like inadvertently using, well, not inadvertently, really, not with Marge, but you're using the term bitch, which is a term technically speaking for a female dog, but we as humans have been using it for other purposes for quite some time now in English. And so, it can't be very easy to hear your dead mother referred to as a bitch, especially at the age of 13. Like, if there's ever a time in life that you're not prepared emotionally to deal with things like that, it's in that range. I mean, and really for the next few years, but I mean, that's definitely like you're in it by then. Um, Anyway, so Harry's like trying not to lose his shit, but like, so he doesn't have an outburst. But what does happen is that Marge's glass that she's holding like explodes in her hand. But Marge, being Marge, like is like, oh no, it's no big deal. I squeezed it too hard. I've got a firm grip. So that totally gets passed off, but there's no doubt that Harry caused it to explode because that's just how angry he was, and that's how these things seem to work. But Marge is not like obviously Vernon and Petunia are both like really startled, and they're looking at Harry, but Marge isn't thinking shit about it because she doesn't know anything about Harry, and because she actually believes herself to have. She said it. She in fact says that the same thing had happened recently at Colonel Fubster's. So maybe she does have a firm grip, but the timing of that, obviously, we know what happened. But anyway, so Harry skips pudding / dessert and gets the hell out of there as soon as he can. And it's mentioned that it's been a long time since he's lost control and made something explode. Like he you know and it's mentioned too that like not only is the whole situation with the Hogsmeade form at stake, but also like he depending on what he does, like he could get in trouble with the Ministry in his mind because he was warned for the shit that Dobby did. It had nothing to do with him, but he was warned for it anyway by the Ministry at the time. So yeah. Dun, 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 dun. And he's like, I don't want to get expelled from Hogwarts, obviously. So that scene ends with him just being like kind of scared, and he heads up to his room and gets out of the way of everybody. So we pass through the next 3 days of him just like trying to go blank minded and thinking about the do-it-yourself broom care whenever Marge starts in on him, and it seems to work fairly well, but apparently it also makes him look like he's in a daze. So now Marge is saying that he might be mentally subnormal. And so we get to the final evening of her stay, because of course we do. We can't have the drama really hit its peak until it's almost over, right? We can't have Harry get through the whole thing without anything catastrophic happening. But we also can't have it be 3 nights before she's supposed to leave. It's the last night, of course it is. And so Petunia cooks like a fancy dinner, and they're drinking bottles of wine, and as if they didn't need to just lay on the overindulgence bit. Anyway. So everything's going, of course, again, everything's going fine through dinner. Nobody's talking about Harry. Vernon's boring them about his Grunning's drill company. And then finally, we're at the end of dinner, and the coffee's being made, and Vernon brings out the brandy because, of course. And so Marge is like, yeah, just a small one, but by a small one I mean fill this giant glass. There we go. That's the boy. Good job. Um, can you imagine what it would have been like to can you imagine what the household that must have been like that Vernon and fucking Marge grew up in? Ugh. Ugh. Yeah, anyway. They really couldn't have been nice people, those parents. They really just couldn't have been. It's not possible to produce that. Um yeah, anyway. So it's it's full on dessert time. Dudley's picking out. Petunia's drinking her coffee with her little finger sticking out because she is. Um, and Harry's like really wants to just leave the table. And of course, if he left the table right now, this would be a very uneventful chapter. However, he catches Uncle Vernon's eyes, his angry little eyes, and knew he had to stick it out for whatever reason. I don't know why. Well, why would Vernon want him to stay? I don't know. Anyway, so Marge starts talking because she does that a lot, and blah, 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 blah. And for whatever reason, she decides to say, I do like to see a healthy-sized boy. And she's saying that Dudley will be a proper-sized man, like his father. So it's like they've made like being overweight like a hallmark of their family. They're proper-sized. Anyway, and then she's like, now this one here. And so then she goes in on Harry, and Harry's like, think about the handbook, and she's calling him mean and runty looking, and back to the dogs thing. She said that she had Colonel Fubster drown one last week. Ratty little thing, weak, underbred. And Harry's like, charm to cure reluctant reversers. And so then we're on to the breeding bit, and she's talking about blood and bad blood, and she's like, I'm not saying anything against your family, Petunia, blah, 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 but your sister was a bad egg, blah, blah, blah. And Harry's like, grasp your broom firmly by the tail. And Aunt Marge is just like going on and on. So you got to give it to him. He's like, he's found his like, Zen practice. He's really trying to stick to it. And so then Aunt Marge decides to ask what Harry's dad, this Potter, did for a living. And which, by the way, I don't feel like I wonder if Rowling's answered that. It's probably on Pottermore or some shit. But if anybody does know, feel free to leave it in the comments, because I love when you leave the comments. What the hell did Lily and James do? They were out of school for I don't remember how old they are when they died, but they've been out of school for some years. Like they obviously had some kind of jobs. I mean, I know they had plenty of fucking money, that's for sure. But you didn't really like get the sense that they were like lazy people, by nature, and that they would have, had some kind of jobs. I don't know. Just curious. Like that's something that never. Anyway, but Uncle Vernon's like, no, he didn't work, unemployed, and of course Marge is like, that's what I thought, and so she kind of starts laying on like the adjectives for what he must have been: no account, good for nothing, lazy, scrounger. And Harry's like, motherfucker, he was not. We can't hold it anymore. The Zen moment is over. And Vernon's like, more brandy, yeah, let's boop. He empties the bottle into her glass, and he's like, tries to send Harry to bed, which, again, should have like let that happen like 10 minutes ago. But Marge is now like right and properly drunk. So she's like, no, stay in here so I can ridicule you some more. And so she's like, really proud of your parents, huh? And blah, blah, blah. And wow, I didn't really realize the irony of that. She's like, and they get themselves killed in a car crash. And then she says, drunk, I expect. As she's, granted, I know she's not preparing to drive anywhere right now. She's staying, but she's fucking wasted. So it's just like, there's a touch of irony there in a drunk person calling out a potential drunk person, which of course they didn't die in a car crash, which is what Harry yells because he just can't like take the indignity of it anymore. It's funny. Like I have that vague memory of like being not obviously anything like Harry's, but just of having trouble letting go of something that angered you when you were in that age range. It's like, it's so hard to just like fucking put it aside. Like it just eats at you. And then of course when somebody's in your face like this, like ridiculing you and your family, that's like, beyond anything that I ever had to deal with. Anyway, and she's like, they did die in a car crash, you liar, blah, blah, blah. And now she's throwing out words about him, insolent, ungrateful, but then suddenly she ain't talking no more. And she seems to be swelling. At first it seems with inexpressible anger, but then she continues to swell. And her face starts to expand, and her eyes bulge, and her mouth stretches, and all these sorts of things. And some buttons like to start to burst from her jacket and ping off the walls. And it's a pretty like intensely but also comical, intensely comical maybe, scene. Basically, she's just inflating at this point is what's happening. And so Aunt Petunia and Vernon are both like, Marge! And they're like trying to like grab onto her, and she's like floating up towards the ceiling, and she's now entirely round. And the dog comes running into the room, and he's barking, and Vernon grabs onto her, and the dog starts biting him, and so Harry's like, fuck this shit. And so he like runs out, and he, on his way to the cupboard for the stairs, the door from it bangs open magically because he wants it to, and he doesn't even really know. He's just, there's a lot of energy in him at this moment. He is livid. And so he grabs all his shit out of there, and he runs upstairs, and he grabs all his shit out from under the bed, and his books and presents and everything, and grabs Hedwig's cage and runs back downstairs and puts everything in his trunk. And then here comes Vernon, and he's like, get back in here, put her right, blah, 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 blah. And Harry's like, you know what, motherfucker? Pulls out his wand. He's like, she deserved it, and you keep the fuck away from me. I'm out. Screw you guys. I'm leaving. And so he opens the door behind him, grabs all his shit, and gets the fuck out. And then he's outside in the dark, quiet street. And he's like, oh. And there's the chapter. That's how it ends. It's not a terribly long chapter. It's, we're in the setup phase, and like I said before, it's a little bit longer of a book, but it's not. Again, we're not to book 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or not 8, 7 standard yet. The 3 is like the intermediate step. So the chapters, I'm sure they get longer near the end of the book because they all have to, but we're still in those like slightly shorter chapters right now. So let's see. Let's see if we've got some YouTube comments to look at from previous episode. I'm clicking on the wrong thing. There we go. From the last episode, Jorge reminded me that quill and parchment is medieval. That Victorian times paper came about and not too much longer. Let's see, where did he say? He said let's see, paper in the 1400s and the metal pen in the 1800s. So yeah, that's how that went. So it does seem that like when the statute of secrecy came into play, like there was that's the fork, and so like a lot of things are still like influenced by or derived from as far back as medieval times. So there's that in the wizarding world. I mean, yes, Sarah Meads, I do pause for breath, but you know, we're on a roll and we're just riding this wave. That's what we're doing. It's really interesting how much this whole thing about the age of the characters is. Let me see something. Hang on a second. Who was it? Somebody gave me the years. There's somebody. I've got a lot of comments, y'all. Not a lot, but they're not on the same videos, and I'm having trouble figuring. And it doesn't show you the whole comment either when you're previewing them. Yes, Cardinal Doomsday. Let's see here. Hang on. Let me move this out of the way. I can't see the screen. There we go. Yeah, you know, when I was thinking about whatever game I was thinking about that was like charades but isn't, I think I was mixing it up with something else altogether, like maybe like Pictionary or something. But you said Hangman. I thought Hangman was just like you like basically like a word game. You like put down a number of blanks and you had to try and guess or something like that and fill out what the word is. And for each time you get it wrong, like you have to draw another body part on the hanged man. That's what I thought that game was. So that maybe is a whole different thing. But anyway, old Cardinal Doomsday also provided me with the birth years of the 4 characters that I mentioned being of certain ages. Now, of course, the thing about birth years is that means I'd have to actually remember what year the story is happening exactly and do the math. But nonetheless, Hagrid was born in 1920, Voldemort in 26. So Hagrid's a little bit older, but which is interesting. 6 years. In that scene in Chamber of Secrets, you don't get the sense that they're like one's at the beginning and one's near the. Wait, what year did Hagrid get expelled? Oh, that is the year. So was it like his 6th year? Or something like that? 5th year? He says what year in like one of the books, but I've forgotten now. And then Molly and Arthur Weasley were born a year apart in 49 and 50. So, as I was saying, they're part of a different generation. You know, and so, like, again, with that whole thing, like, it's my main explanation for why you didn't guess. And I'm not saying that I guessed either. I just knew because the 50 years thing is kind of hard to ignore. But the explanation that I have for why we didn't think of Hagrid or Voldemort as being as old as they are is because Voldemort's unhuman-like as you can possibly be, so he's not going to show his age. He doesn't have any hair. He's magically modified. He there's nothing about him that's going to. He's almost like the magical version of like a fucking God damn it, what do you call like an android kind of type of deal, except that it's magical modifications instead of technological ones. And then Hagrid's a half giant, so like the rules are kind of out the book for him. It's not. I don't know what I just said, but throw out the rule book maybe is what I was trying to say. I don't know, but you know, he's not going to fit the aging conventions of a standard human. And so, and I mean, I know he's described as being like having like a big brown beard, and like I can't remember if it has any gray in it or not. It ought to, I guess, but like I said, maybe there's just a whole different thing going on there with his giant blood, and I, you know, I don't know. The point being is that he's different enough from a standard human that like it gives him like the leeway to age differently than standard humans do, even if his brain seems to work pretty much the way that a human does, aside from the fact that he sees, you know, monsters as being, you know, just big animals, which there's, you know, an argument for that side of it because, well, anyway, let's not worry about the because right now, but, anyway, and yes, as much as I don't like it, the Cursed Child has been called canon by Rowling herself. Obviously, most people who are fans of the original story and who have read the script don't feel this way. They feel like that it's kind of a it's fanfic. I mean, and it is. It's not good. What I have well, I kind of ran into some videos on YouTube yesterday. Really, just the one in particular. There's others that are referenced though, but one thing that somebody said was that like people who've seen the play and who saw it first, like before reading it, or maybe never read it but have seen it, enjoyed it immensely. Whereas the rest of us, which is most of us, who haven't seen The Cursed Child and who have read it and were, you know, dying to read it, and we're, you know, even like myself, were like mildly okay with it when after the first reading, before they really like let it sink in what had happened and like how, you know, how bad it actually was. Yeah, that we were all displeased. I mean, it was a letdown in a big way. It's not. She says that she collaborated on the story, but whatever her involvement was, she didn't write it. Bottom line, and that's clear. Like that's so clear. Anyway, so yeah, I don't like the idea of it being canon, but I don't know what you know. I mean, hell, the first scene in the play is this last scene of the books, and they changed dialogue. How the fuck can it be canon if it's not the same? It should be word for word the fucking same, and it's not. So I don't even understand how you do that with canon, but whatever. We're not we can't have everything we want. At least we have a new Fantastic Beast movie coming, and it looks really good, and I'm excited about that. I really like Newt Scamander a lot. I really enjoyed the first movie. I like the understated nature of it. I love J.K. Rowling's comedy, and it's her writing, and you can feel it. Anyway, let's see. Yep. And Jessica Min mentioned like maybe Riddle was able to use his memories like as evidence, like showing the same scene to the Ministry that he showed to Harry in that diary. But I mean, who knows? Maybe. I I have to see if I can find out if she ever answered that more satisfactorily. Like, how did Riddle actually get Hagrid convicted and expelled and all that shit? Oh, and so like one other thing I was gonna mention, I saw this somewhere today too, that the gifts that that Harry receives in the first chapter, the previous episode. Let's see, hang on, I want to see if I can. They all sort of like foreshadow a event later in the story. Obviously, Hagrid's Monster Book of Monsters not only foreshadows his teaching job, but also there's a, well, monster seems like a slightly harsh word for a hippogriff, but there is an animal at least coming up in the story that some are afraid of anyway. That plays a very important role in the plot. I mean, and really, you could say that there are other monsters in this story too. But anyway, Ron sends him the sneakoscope, which, even though they don't realize it, there's a point later in the story where it's going off, and there's a reason why it's not faulty. And like later, they're able to sort of like see that, if I'm not mistaken. Also, Ron sends that picture of him and his family in Egypt, and it's this same picture that that reaches Black in Azkaban. And Hermione sent him the broomstick. And there's, well, I mean, I don't know. This is kind of conjecture, but anyway, like obviously Harry is way into Quidditch, but then also he gets a broom in this particular story from somebody. And that's a bit much to even get into all that right now. But there's a site called Spark Notes that I have gotten some of these thoughts from, just, to kind of like add to my own. I mean, granted, like when I'm doing the chapter, I'm not looking at that stuff, but these are some of the things I've just gone over just now. And I think that's really it. So, thank you, as always, for coming and listening, and we'll keep this train rolling for as long as we can. And we will see you in the next one.